Good morning, everyone. It is Monday, October 20th, 2025. I know this month is going quickly. It is just after 9 o'clock. It's our strategic planning meeting. We're doing budgets talks once again. Please let the record reflect that we have Commissioner Kearns, Commissioner Thornton, and Commissioner Cuney, and Commissioner Walters has just joined us. So those are the commissioners that are in the room. So we will go ahead and get started now. Jeff, I'll let you just set the stage for our budget discussions this morning.
We're gonna have 4 back-to-back groups, starting with detention, then building, planning, and housing. And I believe there's an executive session in there.
Okay, so we will go ahead and get started today.
Well, good morning, commissioners. We are here after our budget presentation last Monday with a number of follow-up questions. And so next slide, Ron. So number of follow-up questions that came out. So work crew, PHM program vacancy assumptions on our vacancy rate, as well as a number of changes to our option 3, which includes Geiger closure. So next slide, please.
So this slide is an overview of what our work crew program 2026 budget would look like under status quo. Approximately $731,000 expenditure budget with an estimated revenue collections of 130 for a net loss of about $601,000. Those expenditures and revenues go into our final settle and adjust. So we do collect 100% at the end of the day. However, the advisory agencies are the ones subsidizing the program beyond what we collect in revenue. Slide. The question was asked last week, what were the work crew services provided? We provided approximately 15,000 man hours last year in 2024 year to date. This year so far through September is about 10,000 hours. And we collected approximately $154,000. We threw on the third column there, which is what the agencies would have had to have paid if they went out for the same number of hours. The top line for community agencies was at minimum wage, and all the other governmental agencies below, we put an estimated prevailing wage on it. And then you can see what it would have costed for these agencies, just an estimate.
Remind me who the main community agencies are.
So Bloomsday, Hoop Fest, Northwest Winterfest, Pacific Northwest Qualifier Volleyball, and Winter Glow. Hoop Fest is the largest. Other questions? Next slide. Oh,
Bryce, back to your comment around the settle and adjust. Can you walk us through? Right now, I think if my memory serves me, the county still carries about 82% of the cost of the detention services. The other 18 is billed out to contracting agencies. Does the same formulaic approach apply to work crew?
correct.
Okay, so the county carries of that
82
number, 82% of the work crew net
Correct.
costs. Okay,
Correct.
thank you.
So same thing here. This is for the EHM program. The total expenditure budget is about approximately 246,000. And we collect estimated revenue of 50,000, which offsets 50,000 that's included in the M&O above for our Sentinel fees, the vendor that actually provides the bracelet services. So exactly the same thing we just talked about. The $196,000 net loss is included in the settle and adjust. So all the costs are covered at the end of the day and then allocated out to the agencies. Like Scott said, 82% to the county, 18% spread on the other agencies.
We're not tracking by what is using. And
So it goes to the overall, it's not just the EHM group, it's to the overall. So it's included in our overall average daily rate. At the top.
So at some point with Workday, is there a way to start to really allocate by individual who's coming in, if it's a city of the valley, what the real costs are?
So I think we could do it today, as we are today. We could have done it years ago, but that's how the contract calculation was done in 2010 or 2011. That it's all included. I think prior to that was well before my time, but I believe it used to take those buckets and allocate them out based on what was used for work crew. And you would take how many people were in total work crew and then allocate those out. Same with EHM, then allocate those out based on the actual usage in the room. And then the contract was changed in 2000.
And I understand trying to make it less burdensome accounting wise, but it's almost like we're losing track of what the real costs are. And if we're gonna look at, equitable billing, then we really have to look at what the real costs are for the individuals, which makes it harder. But because you're basically tracking by person, what that is, but in some ways, we have to get to that to know what the real costs are for each entity.
Yeah, we looked at it years ago. We were looking at a different way to calculate costs. And we looked at the cost of actual booking because it's much cheaper to keep somebody in custody for 30 days. Housing's cheaper than how many staff. Booking's very intensive. And so we looked at it. I'm not sure it could be done. We could figure it out. We figured out the number of hours, but like when we met about that, it was at quarterly stakeholders, like the cost of a book and release. Somebody's booked in, but the number of staff, there's 9 people in the booking area. It is fairly time consuming. You have medical, you have all those things. So it's much more expensive for short stays rather than long stays. So we did look at that years ago, but we haven't looked at it for quite some time. So
As we look to what equitable, what other billing types we're gonna try to do, I think we have to look at that as one of the options. Because, I think, with the Law and Justice Council, did we look at, that, yes, a book and release is very expensive. Versus someone who isn't. But I mean, I think we kind of have to start to, if we're gonna look at fractionalized billing or equitable billing or whatever we're trying to call it, I think we're gonna have to look at what that really is and as far. Otherwise, we're just starting to average out everything, and I don't think that's gonna be beneficial to anyone. We've got to really know what those costs are. So we can be transparent and honest about what they are and how much it's costing county versus what this, potentially the state should be paying versus what, jurisdictions are paying for misdemeanors. So we're gonna have to probably get there at some point to really understand it if we're gonna renegotiate these contracts. And if it's been since 2010, 25 years.
Like any contract, like any contract that's been out, there's probably opportunities to refresh, and if we have better ability to specifically track certain expenses that are allocable to an individual entity, probably makes more sense to that than blend it over to carry the entire cost. I'm curious on EHM, guys, if I understand the court program correctly, those that the court assigns a third party EHM, the offender who's out on EHM carries the entire cost. They pay for those costs directly with a third party, right?
director will probably be paying the court back if there's some sort of payment plan.
So this one here, the way our program has been set up and the way it's been incorporated into our contracts, the third party, the individual who's on EHM is paying for the home monitoring costs, but they're not paying for our staff time to do the program. So do we know, like, if this were a standalone program and it was billed based on individual on it, would the cost for an individual who's on EHM be more expensive with our program than the court? Do we know what those comparables might be?
I don't.
My instincts are it's cheaper because they're only paying the monitoring cost under the court program.
I believe it's much cheaper. I believe, and I might I'm not 100% sure, but this Moon was about $25 a day for monitoring fees. So it doesn't take into account like our daily rate of $175 a day for a daily rate, so.
Yeah.
So I would think it would be much cheaper, but like you said, it's not the same home monitoring, but it is an option.
I guess my point on that is if we were to be doing, if an offender who is on EHM was paying the county, our detention services for our EHM program, they would likely be paying a substantially higher number than the court, the EHM directly to the court. So it is an expense to the offender to be out on EHM. Effectiveness of the programs, there's definitely a difference in them, but we're basically having the jurisdictions and the county for the most part cover the cost of the EHM program as opposed to the offender, which that's a big differential between the court program and our program.
All good? All right, next slide, please. So vacancy reduction assumptions. So the left box there is the assumptions that we had going into last week's presentation. Options 1 and 2 included approximately 900,000 that we talked about for the 9 FTEs that were vacant for over 12 months. Option 2 included a proposed savings of 289,000 for 4 currently vacant positions that we were not going to fill. So essentially a vacancy reduction for 2 TAs and 2 TA2s, 1 TA3, and 1 mechanic. Included in this presentation today, on top of those, we have added 1.38 vacancy reduction for 14 additional employees, 10 corrections officers, 1 sergeant, 1 technical assistant 2, and 2 case managers that we don't expect to hire. However, we will continue hiring per discussion with Scott. That brings us down to budget for 6 vacant positions. Currently, we hired 3 last week, 3 corrections officers last week started. We have 2 mental health professionals that are interviewing now. I believe 1 was offered a position. So we expect those 2 to be filled by the end of the year. To leave this budget for 1 vacant book. We are actively. So after all of these vacancy reductions, we have a budget for 6 vacancies. 3 vacancies. But by the end of the year, we hope to be completely full. Make sense? No question.
Those are intended. What you're saying is there's some positions that are vacant that you intend to fill, and then there's others that you do not intend to fill.
Correct.
Okay, maybe
It's one big reduction.
Can I clarify?
Yes.
So option 1 and 2, when you say included a vacancy reduction, is that really just eliminating those positions that are vacant? Is that what that was?
It was,
intended to be?
so budget office looked and identified these 9 positions. Said they've been vacant for over 12 months.
Yeah.
So they pulled them out of PeopleSoft HR to get a better look at what our bigger picture looks like. Our discussions were, they were not actually being removed. They were still authorized positions. If and when we ever happen to get to that point, then they would be added back to Workday to give us a better picture of what we were looking. So that's
So
what those 9.
The 1.3 is kind of a new idea that looking at past number of vacancies, what we've been running, we think we can plan for a little bit lower expense. And then we'll adjust as needed in a budget
Correct.
amendment.
Correct.
But continue
So
hiring those positions.
Basically freeing up that 1.4 million if we are completely flat next year. If we happen to go positive on hiring, then we would need a little bit of budget depending on how our attrition.
Just following up on that. You're optimistic, you've got some hirings in the pipeline, but if you look at the past couple of years, you've been running X number of vacancies that's fairly significant or fairly routine. So it probably makes sense to make some assumptions there.
Yeah, overall vacancies will be flat this year. We have been shooting for about 5 positive. It's taken up 5 vacancies, but with retirements and everything. End of the year 25, I think I'll be flat for what I was with 24. So for a number of positions altogether.
So that's basically where we sit after that 1.4 is assuming a flat budget from where we are today or where we will be by the end of this year.
So if you look at this year, what you budgeted for this year, where you think you'll end, what are the vacancies that you budgeted for this year? And what you're thinking you'll end, what's that number? Is that 20?
Believe we budgeted for 18 vacant COs is where we ended up last year. And that I think was what we came up with.
No other positions, just
I
the
think there was,
COs.
and I
It
think
wasn't
people-
identified, it wasn't identified two actual positions last year during the budget process. It was just a flat dollar amount. Here's what we're pulling out rather than actually identifying.
And how much was that?
It was north of 2 million, 2.2, 2.3, if I remember right.
I thought it was in the 18-22 range.
And that's,
So we just came up with, I think you and I looked at hiring traditional for over the last few years. And I think it was 18 COs and 2 cooks we didn't think we would fill, was kind of come up with a realistic estimate for that. So I don't remember the exact dollar figure, but 18 COs and 2 cooks is what I remember.
So 20, let's just call it 20 vacant positions we had as a vacancy adjustment in last year. Currently, if I'm going back to your slide from last week, you got 33 vacant positions. That was as of the snapshot, right? Not including what you just added. So there's been 9 removed out of the current budget. And then I just want to test this. Those 9 are also excluded from your option 1, your baseline do nothing approach, right? So there's 9 already adjusted out. Okay. So that got you down to about 24 budgeted positions that aren't filled as of this particular date. And then you're recommending to take out another 14.
so then also the 4 below it also. So we've added the 4 currently vacant, the TAs to the status quo. So we've reduced those 4 out.
Okay.
Brings you to 20.
Okay. So 14 plus the 4 plus the 9.
Correct.
Am I counting that right?
Yep, and that leaves you the 6 that I was mentioning with 3 COs.
So about 23 vacancy adjustment, those positions. Just making sure I'm correct. Okay, so. What,
27, sorry, 27.
27?
27 total, so it's 9 in the 4.
18
Plus
okay,
4.
got it.
Yes.
All right, so that's just helpful in, as I look at this, it's a budget exercise. We're trying to be as predictive as we can about where we think we're gonna be. We know the last many years, we've had a pretty significant vacancy rate we've not been able to fill. And the team has known that if they are able to fill positions that hadn't been budgeted for, we need those positions. So we'll work with the commissioners and say, hey, can we get a budget amendment because we're actually being more successful, but trying to give as best we can, a true view of what the budget needs are going to be, knowing that we have vacancies in there, because if we don't include vacancies, then we're artificially inflating our expenses. So that's what the team's trying to do, is give a realistic look based on what history has told us of a local, regional, and national CO shortage, and even detention services as a whole. So I'm just trying to summarize up what I think I heard from you guys, so we're all operating off that. So 27, it's about, from what I see here, it's about $100,000 per position.
Yeah, so just adding those 3 numbers, about 2.5 million, little over. So is that? Yeah, which helps you match or come down to your budget,
Yes. So that
but.
that brings
it
us to.
Doesn't affect anything.
It will, so it gives us budget for what we will have by the end of the year as far as positions. Those reductions bring us to, we can pay for what we have as of December 31st.
Yeah,
For
those-
2026 in the future. So at the end of 25, we'll have all of these filled and we'll have budget for everybody that we have filled in. No more, no less.
Yes. So for 25, you're okay because you have the budget for it. That. But as you're trying to look at flat lining your budget, one way is to look at these vacancies that potentially aren't getting filled. Reduce the budget by the 2.59 or 6. And yes, and as if you're successful, I mean, you definitely get to come back and go, okay, we're able to fill them. You know, let's, we will have to figure out how we pay for that, but it's like. Otherwise, we're kind of, as Scott's saying, I feel like we're almost setting you guys up that you've got an inflated budget. But we'd rather have it be realistic as to what we're adopting today, knowing, some of the other things. I think we've done that with other departments. It's like. Kind of keep you where you're at. And with that reduction, I think helps you. That you're not having to find other cuts. Because that's already a cut that's happening. It's already a kind of a false number. In some ways, and again, if you can hire corrections officers, we'll be so excited and help you out.
So you guys, I think where you're getting to, Mr. CUNY, is what do these additional vacancy reductions that you're building in, what's that now? How does that now affect option 1, 2, and 3 to revise? You've got an assignment coming up.
Yep, okay.
Yep.
Anything else on that one?
Okay. Line, wanted to give you kind of a new look at this. You'll see there's an upper portion of the matrix, which was the data you received last week for 26 and 27. Below that, there's kind of a new view for 26, 27, and 28. Now, a couple of the changes we made assumption wise, inmate shift is now being done mid 26 instead of the beginning of 26. Reduction shift. Officer attrition obviously comes in after that, so that gets shifted out at midpoint of 26. And then we did revise the overtime assumption as well. Previously, we had a 50% cut in overtime. Obviously, if we move a bunch of officers from Geiger to the jail, we can reduce the overtime. 50% sounded safer originally. We talked through that a little bit, thought 65% is probably viable. So we adjusted that accordingly as well. So you'll see the revenue and the cost savings shift slightly. So I'll look at the lower half of the matrix, 10-20 portion. The estimated housing revenue status quo in the first column stays relatively the same. Estimated housing revenue in 26 changes because we maintain inmate headcount through the first half of the year. So you see that 6.02 now is 10.57. And then it levels off around 8 when we go to a 50% reduction approximately. And 8.44 below that. When you subtract those two, you come out with the third column estimated housing revenue loss. Again, we see a smaller number in 26, 5.07. Because again, we maintained half a year's worth of revenue with those inmates staying put. And then we, again, kind of level off again at that 842 and 880 number. The estimated savings, so that would be the 1, 2, 3, 4th column. Again, we don't realize savings until we shift inmates back to the jail and begin the process of shutting down Geiger. So the savings goes from 6 million originally in the previous conversation to 2.92, so approximately half. And then again, we level out at around 5.8 to $6 million. So you can see on the far right side, the numbers have shifted from a $392 million loss and a 274 to a 2.15, ranging all the way to 2.59 the following year, 27 and 2.3. Questions or comments? And I do have, based on feedback you gave last week about having a tough time probably following when these events are happening and when those impacts are kind of aligning with the timeline. I do have a supplemental that hopefully you guys all have in your hand, which everybody have that. I think we might have had a pile there. I can get it out. Okay. I can walk you through the supplemental if that's like to help make more sense. This is well. I won't go through every one of the task names, but again, this is a model, right? We had to make some assumptions. We had to make some best guesses as to when you might want to implement these things if you choose to do so. But starting out on the top, section 1.0 regional agency contracting. Obviously, in order to make these changes, there would have to be a breaking of the contract and establishing new contracts. So to start things off, just projecting, that mid-year change for 26, we would have to issue termination letters at the start of the year, so on 1/1 of 26. And a 180-day notice has to be triggered with the regional agencies, so that would take us out to mid-26 before those contracts would actually terminate. And throughout that time, 26, we would be attempting to renegotiate new contracts with those regional agencies. So kind of a tall effort. I think there's 8 or 9 or 10 different contracts we'd have to go through, so not a small amount of work. New contracts hopefully would be effective on 1/1 of 27, but again, this is a model. We're just projecting out a possible scenario for you. But with that new contract, obviously, capacity is always an issue for us. Not currently. We're seeing kind of low numbers here recently, but historically, we know we've got challenges with headcount and capacity. So reduced headcount would have to be a part of that contract renegotiation. A lower term notice, 180 days, is challenging. And then potentially an equitable billing component, or as you brought up, potentially a fractionalized billing as well. Inmate headcount, with the first and easiest thing to do for us is to reduce the USM or US Marshals and Department of Corrections inmate population. It's about 90 inmates today, and historically, that's about an average. So that's easy to do, and we can implement that in June of 26. And then we would look for another potential 75 inmates coming out of the regional, the city, the valley, etc. We would attempt to reduce as well to get us to that magic 130, 140 heads that we would have to reduce, and so that we could take the remainder out of Geiger and move them into the jail facility. Moving down into operations, just a couple key points here. We would have to trigger 3.10. We would have to trigger some capital improvements at the jail. We've got that tank down below in the matrix at $1.7 million one time. It amounts to replacing 100 single beds with bunk beds, adding an additional 34 beds and 6 shower bays at the 3rd floor, which would ultimately gain us 34 beds total, which would help alleviate some of the capacity issues as we try to migrate these inmates over. Geiger staff transition obviously would take place at the same time as the inmates would transition in the middle of 26. The time reduction starts being realized in the second half of 26. And then you can see we've got a little bit of a 3.6, 3.7, 3.8. It's about winding down operations at Geiger. So we would initially, for a 6-month, 9-month timeframe, possibly mothball Geiger. We'd still have to maintain the facility, keep the heat on, make sure, plumbing and everything else is not deteriorating. And then ultimately decommissioning Geiger after that, which is stripping the facility of equipment, furniture, etc., preparing it for the demo and abatement, which would come in 28 at a cost of $4.75 million. So if you look at the bottom of the matrix, you can see those corresponding numbers that you saw on the previous slide that we just walked through. And again, it's your choice as to if you want to go down this route, when you activate these things, the termination, the recontracting, when we would actually start shifting inmates, etc. I also have a breakdown at the very bottom of the operational savings. You can see that you receive about half of those operational savings in 26. And then you get full 5.83 to 6.5 million in 27 and 28. You can see the 24 COs attritioned out, overtime reduction, lease savings out of Geiger. And then there's a few assumptions here built in that we talked through. That's the extent of that supplemental. Questions, comments? Okay.
Can you refine, so under 1.4, that's the fractionalized billing. Assuming it would be implemented in 27, right? And then 2.20 regional agency population reduction.
Mhm.
What is that 55 to 60% based on? Again, tell me about that scenario. Cause the billing would be a different payment model. Is the idea here also to reduce the headcount by that amount for those agencies? Across the board, or with the 55% is kind of once you do the US Marshals.
55% of the regional agencies.
So what about the valley and the other cities?
Those are all in, so they're a part of that number. Right in front of me. So you would look at, you know, on average, 2025 average, the city of Spokane has about 123 units per month. City of the Valley has about 20. Caraway, Cheney, Medical Lake, Deer Park, Liberty Lake make up 4, 5, 6.
That's all their misdemeanors, right, in this. scenario.
Gross misdemeanors and misdemeanor.
Okay.
So we would look to take 50% of that population, approximately 55,
Got it.
and cut that down to make room at the jail to squeeze the remaining inmates on.
And then fractionalized billing would be for someone who has a felony, they're in there, but they've also got other charges.
Correct.
So
They have
that's
trailing
not
misdemeanors.
different population than only gross misdemeanor. Okay, all right, thank you.
So it's like about half, and it's about 150 regional misdemeanors. Is that what you're saying?
Over, if you include US Marshals
Oh,
and DOC
any of the
and
contracts.
regional agencies.
It's about 150. So
Yeah.
You're cutting that to about half. 75.
That is correct, yeah. So you're gonna get about 75 out of these regional agencies, and the remainder is gonna come out of the 90 US Marshals and DOCs. So
So 75 plus more?
the US Marshals and the DOC.
Oh.
At some point, we would bring back probably 20
Oh,
trial
trial ready.
ready.
I see.
Yeah,
Okay.
so
we have
temporarily
room
you go to
for-
0.
Do you think you have room for 95 more folks downtown?
We would, yeah, well, especially given current population, but we know that it ebbs and flows, right?
Okay.
We're in a bit of a trough right now. It would certainly work right now. But we have to plan for peaks, and that's always the challenge, right? So at the beginning of this year, we were pushing up against 900 inmates total. Now, today, I think we're at 740-ish, 750. So we're in a trough, but obviously we have to plan for the worst case, so this does allow for worst case.
And we're adding 35 new beds that we didn't have before.
Correct.
The showers enable us to do that and put more beds in the dorms, et cetera.
So Ken, quantify on 2.1 and 2.2, what are those number assumptions? So reduce USM and DOC.
I think I heard 90 today down to 0.
Down to 0.
Okay, so that's about 90, and then I'm hearing on 2.2, it's about 75.
And then as 27 comes online, we would look to bring back probably 20-ish trial ready. US Marshals systems.
So then on 2.3, once those reductions are made, once 3.1 is done to add the 34 more downtown spaces, you would be able to transition the remaining the 75 that will remain, theoretically remaining at Geiger downtown. Okay.
Is that 34, the number we kind of settled on, we were looking at 1.7 million on that?
We're revising that because I don't think, if you look at, there's two components, there's adding additional bunks. Or just trading out kind of the way that these double bunks are working right now and adding double stacked bunks versus there's a way to have two inmates in those today. That's not gonna get us any more beds. So we want to break out those two numbers. What does that cost? And what is just the cost to add the 34 beds? That's probably what we're gonna recommend with you all, is just the cost to add the 34 beds. So it'll be less than 1.7.
Okay.
And Scott, we did break that out slightly, so you cut it in half and you could get the 34 beds and the 6 showers, which are necessary for
Yep.
those 34 beds, so we'll call it $800,000 must have. If you'd like to get the extra 100 beds, which replace existing beds.
Yep.
It's.
But the
full
third, so the
blown.
34 beds to add them downtown is $800,000.
Yeah. Any other questions before I move on to the next one? Wanted to give you a view of equitable billing again, if you should choose to go down this route, wanted to give you a sense for what that would mean financially. So what you're looking at here is full year 2024, which is the last full year that we could operate from. So in the blue columns, you can see what we actually filled out. County was responsible for about 82.29%. The annual housing costs. City of Spokane, about 14%, Valley, 3%, etc. If you were to apply equitable billing this year of 2024, you would see that the county's responsibility would reduce by 11.6%. And making up that 11.6%, the city of Spokane covers about increases by 9.13%, Valley 1.59%. So over off to the right side, you can see that county's obligation would go down $6.18 million. Cities would go up 4.87. Valleys would go up 849,000. Airway would go up 300,000. So it's a pretty significant shift.
And that's assuming the 24 population numbers, which were much higher. And if the commissioners said, yeah, we're gonna close Geiger now because we can't afford to keep 2 facilities open, the equitable billing would only apply to those agencies, would apply to all agencies, but only apply to that which we have capacity for, which would be substantially less than these numbers. These numbers are based on a population from a couple of years ago, not what the population would be if you close Geiger. So those number differentials would be greatly different.
And that's on the blended rate, not cost center like everybody's talking about. Yeah.
So in a scenario like this, if there's someone from the valley, for example, on a felony and a gross misdemeanor, that's their charges, they might. It's an interesting question about whether they would be held on whatever the gross misdemeanor piece of that is. If it's a package of charges, right? It would be 1-to-1 cost. So the total cost would be split in half.
For as long as they're here on both charges, if one got released, if one or the other got released, then the full cost would fall on that agency.
So if it's 2 misdemeanors and a felony, is it 2-to-1 or is it still split?
If it's in the same agency, it's the same agency, then it would be if it's city, valley, felony, it would be the third. Because we see lots of people with
Multiple.
20 from the city, and that gets down to really minute fractionalized.
And there's some other examples of other agencies in Washington State that is doing something similar to this.
Benton, Kitsap, Yakima, correct.
On the fractional billing, would it be based upon what they were charged with at arrest, or would it be based upon what they were adjudicated with after the trial?
I think it could be it could be what you want it to be, but I think we're envisioning it would be while they're being held, and then if they're adjudicated and they're sentenced, it would depend on what they're sentenced for. Are they sentenced on the felony? Are they sentenced on the misdemeanor? Maybe you guys could speak a little more artfully on it.
Yeah, and like you said, many charges start out as a felony and then end up being pled out as a misdemeanor. We assume the way we bill now is what they're held in on that day. So I think that's the easiest and most fair way to do it. Because same thing, or an agency, arresting agency can overcharge and then it relies on a felony and then at some point in the future be pled down to a misdemeanor. It seems to be the fairest way, and that's what we're talking is equitable billing, is to charge on a daily rate what they're held on, and it should be one felony, one misdemeanor. And if it is pled down to a misdemeanor at a later date, I don't think it changes. You're gonna redo all the back billing. That doesn't seem to make sense. It seems to be, it makes sense to us that you charge them based on what they're held that day. So, sorry, Commissioner.
Well, and my concern is if the PD and the PA are successful at reintroducing ECR, then, you know, that could also have a pretty impactful adjustment to the equitable billing and stuff. So that's why I was wondering, you know, what metric are we going to use? I don't really have a preference as to what there's a lot of logic to whatever they were arrested at, whatever they were charged with when they were arrested, but
Yeah, we were envisioning it to be a charge at any given day of what the underlying offenses are they're being held on. Once they got sentenced, if they're staying in our facility, that charge, the agency who would carry the ongoing would be whatever they were charged, whatever they were sentenced on.
And we began conversation with the prosecutor on the ECR. So talking through that process right now, along with public defenders, and so that could bring more redemption on the federal side. We see and drop some of those down too as well.
which will impact these numbers.
Good, depending on how.
Last slide in this room.
Okay, this is back, the numbers have changed, and so these are our three options we presented last week. More review, we've got additional budget requests for status quo, would be 5.39, not the 7.06 that it was originally. Option 2, which was Geiger A building as well as work crew and EHM programs closed. It would be 3.39 now, it was originally 4.77, and then closing the facility in its entirety. The request would still require 2.15. It was previously 3.92.
And I'm realizing that we could do an option, you know, with it's option 2 right now, and then eventually go to option 3 with the kind of the plan to slowly transition out of there. I mean, there's options in there that we.
Well, just an observation, you need more options because it keeps on getting cheaper with more options.
Yeah, keep looking for.
Just an observation.
So this is what we continue, we'd like to keep presenting to the board and then follow up with any questions that the board has. Options as well.
What is the time frame for when we anticipate the final contract being on the medical provider?
We're thinking hopefully at the end of the year, or early February, maybe a month into next year.
I would hope that we'll be in front of you by then. So.
We're gonna try to not pay the extension fee because it's pretty absorbent. To extend it with NAVCare, so our goal is to have it done for that.
Mid-December.
Somewhat related arbitration, the hearing results from the 482 labor contract, I believe we're gonna get maybe early February.
It'll be after.
Baked into the budget estimate.
The budget office does have some estimates baked in there, I believe, so.
This is helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, that's. Good job.
So this assumes essentially mid-year. You get having these things implemented in full and then the realized savings and revenue losses
For only half the year.
for all of 2006. Okay. For the 2026 option 3, percentage. Okay.
And then to the equitable billing in 2027.
But in order for any of that to happen, as far as the equitable billing, any of these discussions, we have to notify agencies, give them the 180-day notice. So I guess based on this, you're saying do it Jan 1?
That would be our goal.
End of the year.
And that also gives the other agencies some time to plan in their budgets and moving forward for the next year.
If we wait until Jan 1 to give the other jurisdictions notice, then I would imagine their response is going to be, why did you wait? Because now I don't have the opportunity to budget for this. I've already got my budget set for 26. Can you push this out in 27, which means we lose a whole half year of revenue? So would it not be better to notify them now so that they can at least budget 6 months of equitable billing?
They wouldn't be budgeting for anything equitable billing because we're assuming that we'd need most of the year to have those contracts redone to have it effective 27. So your point is right on, Commissioner French. There's nothing saying we should wait. This is just simply if we gave notice by the end of the year, then we would be able to have a mid-year transition on the Geiger facility. So, but I agree with you, it's better to communicate earlier if that's what the will of the board is.
Yeah. I mean, if I was city council working on a budget, I would appreciate the heads up as opposed to having to figure out how to go back and scrap together funds. And if they take a waiver on their property tax increase, and that would have been what they needed to cover this, then they've lost their opportunity.
Is there some kind of jurisdiction group or something on the deal that you referenced previously?
Yep.
And when does that meet? What does that look like as a place to have conversations about what options are being talked about?
Yes.
Yeah, when's the next call?
So they're set quarterly, so quarterly
Okay.
go out. We are in the middle of our, excuse me, our audit of September. So September 30th will be the quarter that we look at. Usually takes 2 to 3 weeks, so we should expect it this week that September's inmate days will be done audited, and then we'll prepare the documents. Likely early November would be the meeting with the stakeholders.
And who comes to those?
All the cities are invited. Primarily City of the Valley, Cheney, Airway.
Airway Heights.
Yep.
Who though, from those jurisdictions, like city manager type? folks
So
or-
so we have some financial folks and then the city.
And we've had discussions about equitable billing for multiple years with them, just never taken that step. I think all of the main agencies are aware of it and we've had the discussions, but we've never made a decision.
We had a conversation with Matt Boston from the city about a year ago.
But yeah, we've not.
Just to breach the idea, Commissioner.
But I mean, to your point, Chair Jordan, we're talking about, like, this would be 2 major changes to the partnership we have with the other regional cities. It'd be not just a conversation about the equitable billing, but it'd also be a conversation about, we may not have room for your misdemeanors. And so it's not just about budgeting or maybe a different billing in the future, but also they would have to have time to go out for contracts for where to put folks who are charged and the judges say they need to be held. So, and these are big changes and big conversations that need to be had.
Yep.
If we were to move forward with option 3.
Any other questions for us?
Okay, but this one very fine.
I didn't know when the next game for the Mariners is.
I can't remember.
Are they still in it?
You got
5
all your-
PM, nobody call.
You got all your Lex charms
I'd
on?
be very stressed.
Oh, man.
You were dying.
Well, good morning, everyone. If anyone who does not know me, I'm Jordan Neal, the Director of Building and Code Enforcement. Just gonna run through general budget proposal and some challenges the department has been facing. The first slide we're gonna run right into is the current permit timelines as of last Wednesday. This is specific to processing and building code review. There are specific permits depending on the complexity of a permit, or departments and agencies will be a part of that review. So this is just reflecting the specific building code and process of building permits. Current timelines on a single family are currently running around 26 days. Addition is similar, the smaller type permits are 14 days. We got commercial at 40 days, that's for like a new build or new big addition. Tenant improvements are running around 29, that's if you want to get occupancy for a new commercial space. And then some minor miscellaneous that can cover anything from a statue to a fence, similar. Those are running about 24, and then general trade are up to 7. Or right now, frequently we're hitting less than 7. Our current goals are to get the single family down to about 3 weeks or less. Pretty much I'd say on all those timelines, we're looking to cut off about 1 week to 10 days on average for all those permits. And if we get to the next slide, I'll tell you some steps we're working on to get that going for you. This is outlining how many current open and filled positions we have. Currently, we have 27 total positions. 3 open, the 3 open are currently an intern position. My previous position as the building official, that's still open, and then a plan examiner position. Anyway, next slide. Currently, what we're doing to adjust to meet those goals are: 1, we're currently hiring the plan examiner position currently. It's actively posted. We have people applying for it, and we're in interview stages right now. Number 2 step in fixing this is we are converting my previous position to an assistant building official position. That has been completed, but now it's in compensation status. So we're at the finish line on getting that posted and advertised to the public. And the last one on here for position specific is the office manager position. That position will help us in creating better reporting, software management, and helping in reducing those workflow problems we get within permits as they get more complex. Although not specifically related to code review, is an essential step in creating that base to help everything flow smoothly and help time for the assistant building official and director to do the code specific items. And the last step I have on here is evaluating our permit software in general. Current permit software has had several complaints by the community, as well as myself and staff. It provides data that is clearly at times not correct, inconsistent, and challenging to work with. So the first step would be, one we've already started, is evaluating our current software and work on those reports and how we can fully utilize it, the current software, but also in addition, evaluating future softwares. And then we can, unless there's questions, we can move along.
Jordan, you and I have talked quite a bit about this. Just for the board's awareness, and correct me if I'm missing anything. Generally, your challenges and timeframes of turning things more consistently and shortening those, which your goal is to provide a predictable, reliable turnaround time on permits for our community. They've primarily been in the plans examiner position, right? Your other support staff that are working on these things have generally been fairly well staffed, but it's that plans examiner, the multiple positions that you have, that's been the challenge, right? Which is why you're hiring one right now through the application process, redoing the assistant building official, or creating that position, which they'll have a component of plan review, plans examination as well, to be able to speed up those times. Am I articulating that correctly?
That is correct. The specific area of need is plan examining. Our processing times are fast. It's our plan examining and code review that is up. And these three additions will clearly create a faster and more consistent timeline to accomplish that goal.
Right now, Jordan's filling a lot of that role, which on the complex code interpretations, he's also having to do. So it's creating just some greater amount of work that has to be done by a fewer number of individuals. So resourcing them up to allow him to come up and stay more at a high level for those complex reviews, and allow the plans examiner and the assistant building official more those resources to be able to do that stuff, that's being carried by Jordan.
Correct. If you look at my number 2 on the assistant building official position, that is one piece of bottleneck. Every piece of complex code that needs some touch from the higher level all goes to me, from code enforcement to every plan review to every inspection. And that's what that assistant building official role will also do, is speed up that process and getting answers to the public when they need them.
Like a triage point, your plans examiner is the first point of being able to evaluate a code interpretation for something that there needs some additional assistance. It would go to the assistant building official. And that would also triage a number of them. And then the next level would be Jordan to do anything final. But to the extent that you can address it at those lower levels, then it speeds up the time to develop review the permits and the plans coming in.
On the number of days for review, are those weekdays or calendar days?
That's calendar.
Calendar days. Okay.
Quick question. You're working on some kind of a dashboard, public facing dashboard, is that correct?
That is correct.
An external one, which we'd use internally as well. Yeah.
And then would that include timeline to issue permits too?
That's the envisioned approach. Start small with more of the key permits that the community probably cares most about, and then truth test it, make sure that the data we're feeling good about, and then start to add more to it.
So like the number of days to first review right now, what does that mean then for the final permit issued? Do we have any data points for how long till someone gets their actual?
We don't
Wow.
currently, because it's a complex problem to solve and getting that data cleanly. If you look at other examples around other jurisdictions, a lot of times you'll see these outrageously long timeframes. It's because there's so many permits and steps involved in that some may not get to the finish line. The project may just close, and then that permit will actually skew the data. So you have to make sure you have all that broken down in steps. That's why it'd be get certain pieces and slowly build out on it, because you have to sparse through so much data. And one anomaly can throw off that to look like 1,000 days, when that may not be the real true picture. From beginning to
And
finish.
is this the average? Is 26 the average, or how did you come up with that number?
This was our snapshot in time of our current queue on last Wednesday. So this is showing the different permit types and when a building code review completed, and from the date it was submitted and processed, it's the day we reviewed it, complete that review. And the reason why that can be challenging to get that full metric again is say someone submits that, hits the submit button, and then we say, hey, this is incomplete, we need more information. If they don't respond in 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, that'll go into that data if you take it the wrong way. That's, we're trying to find, when you submit this complete package, when you get your review completed, what can you expect? Is my first goal.
So if I brought in an application, a complete application today, turned it in for a single family residential home, how long until I get my permit?
From a bill, it depends on the departments as well as billing. That's why I said in the beginning, I only have control over the system for the building permit, processing, and the building code review piece. Other departments will be assigned to that task, so if they get a backlog and they're behind, it changes the whole time frame. That's a little bit out of my control.
Yeah.
Right now, if you had a perfectly complete submittal, it's likely going to be done within 30 days, but that's putting in a very slim box when there's a lot of variables on where you're located, what type of project is it? Do you have another house already on the property that can extend it? Are you on shoreline? Bunch of factors, but I'd say a typical, no odd problems, 30 days is a pretty typical timeline.
So I've had this conversation with Scott. I'll share it with the rest of the board. In my architectural practice, I've probably done over 5,000 retail stores. I used to be the design architect for a number of retail chains. And one of those was based out of Vancouver. And so the 6,000 square foot format store, there's a point to this. I did in Northtown Mall, I did in the Valley Mall, did in a variety of malls throughout the Northwest. One of those was in Twin Falls, Idaho, the Twin Falls Mall. So the store at Northtown took me 90 days to permit. The store at Valley Mall took 60 days. That's when it was still in the county. The store in Twin Falls took me 7 days. I overnighted the drawings to Twin Falls on a Friday. They got it on Monday. That Friday, they called me and said, your permit's ready to pick up. I go, how did you do that? Because it's the fastest. One of the things they have is they have a concierge service where somebody, when a set of plans is submitted, it goes to an individual, and that individual is responsible for making sure that it navigates through all the different departments. I think, how many departments have to check up? It's like 16 different departments. If it's in the county, you've got the health department, you got L&I, you've got all of these other agencies that have to check off on it. And if he is spending his quality time having to track where these drawings are in the permit process, we're using him as the concierge as opposed to being the building. And so I just pose if we should look at being able to develop something that has good quality people like Jordan and his staff doing what we pay them to do, which is review the drawings and have somebody else be the caretaker to make sure they get through the process. And that will speed up the time, because you can have a set of drawings that he's already approved sit on somebody else's desk for weeks or months, waiting for it to move and stuff. So just an idea to try and improve the process a little bit.
I've heard similar things like that in major cities.
Yeah.
So, like your LA, your Chicago, your Miami, your large cities, that's a profession. Someone literally carries your application to where it needs to go at the local government, like actually walks it through the
Nags the right people.
it's something. I mean, I remember hearing about that. It's like, whoa.
So when we're thinking about developing the dashboard though, then we really need to look at the other departments as well.
Absolutely.
And how long public works, sewer, water, all the different checkpoints. Because it's like someone was holding that concierge accountable.
Yeah.
Even though they had to go to multiple departments to get you that permit in a week. So I think that's part of it, when you have this dispersion of responsibility. How do we encourage like setting reasonable goals? And then making sure that it's hitting all the different points, not just Jordan's department, right?
Well, and they measure the performance of the concierge based upon time of receipt, time of permit. And that's your metric. Not how many comments there were, or any like how fast did you get it through the process?
I think we had issues like with Public Works, that it would go to Public Works and there wasn't any tracking. I think that they've started to figure that out, is what I understand. Starting to get through that process, because I had a couple of citizens that called about permits that were then kind of works. So they were starting to now figure out how they're tracking that to make sure it's getting back on a time and all of that, so.
Yeah, I mean, Commissioner Waldorf is right on. A dashboard is not complete unless you have all the pieces together. And our common ones internally are building, planning, public works. Those are the ones who touch permits. And so Jordan can report on his part of it, but in order for you all to get the full view, you have to have all of it combined. And part of why Jordan's highlighted number 4 there is our permitting software today that we use is not up to what we think the quality of it should be. And I think coming back to kind of the concierge service, I've seen in other jurisdictions where it's call it whatever you want to, but even a permit management team where they're the single throat to choke. They're the one person that the person who submitted the permit, that's assigned to them, or a team of 3 or whatever. That's the only person that they need to communicate through to get the status of their permit. And that person is responsible for going around to the departments and shepherding that through in a very consistent way. It's a different mindset. It's a different approach. We've not taken that, at least during my time here, but it does have some value from other jurisdictions.
So the one thing you might want to take a look at, Scott Chesney and I sit on the TIB board. And at the last board meeting here last month, they did a presentation because they manage anywhere from 500 to 700 jobs a season. And that's not only, the design, but construction, the whole 9 yards. And they've got a dashboard that you can go to, and because it's color coded as to the status of where the permits are at. You go to the dashboard and tell instantly, we got a problem here because of time delays. And then they respond to it and stuff. But it's an incredible, Scott and I went to dinner afterwards and spent the majority of our time talking about their dashboard. Because it was to manage that many projects and have it just bang, exactly where you're at with any one of them. Really a great tool. So I encourage you to take a look at that tool.
We could get a strategic planning session where we bring in those key departments and kind of walk the process, talk about what the status of dashboard development is, and talk about other ideas to increase the efficiency.
I think it's great to have a deeper conversation because we go on a lot about this thing and the shortcomings of the current software and how are we getting everyone buying into accountabilities for delivering things on a timely basis, then measuring that and then sharing that. Every jurisdiction, whether you're on the west side of the east side of the state or in the middle or in another state, we could say here, and we have in the past, our permit timed issuances are phenomenal compared to other jurisdictions. But it doesn't matter for those developers or those home builders here. Ours is a regionalized, so they're going to base us off of each other. And so that's where we want to be focusing on how do we be the leader in that area. Comparing ourselves to Seattle falls on deaf ears when you talk to developers and builders here in town. So we need to be focused here. What should be the expectation that we have, that the community has for receiving permits in whatever time frame that is.
Well, I was just gonna ask, is the permit software, are all these entities, so building, planning and public works, all using the same software?
We are but in different ways. And I would say if there's workflow value to be gained in that, that handoff to different departments, I'd say the software is the most clear piece of it to me, for that part. There's many new modern softwares that can handle better resubmittal processes, better workflow. It can automatically shoot out an email as soon as it goes, just from a geographic area. If you say my project's here, you'll know to send it somewhere perfectly. So there's a lot of, that's the biggest room for growth in that workflow process from an immediate standpoint that I have seen. I agree with having someone watch over the permit. We do have a system currently similar to that now, but the issue is you're really, again, stuck by the software. So that always comes to the same point, circles around back to you're only as good as the vessel you're using kind of situation. So that would be my opinion of is the biggest highlight I could see in quick improvement is the software.
Cause you do have some staff that are, I think you have a position, right, that is in your department where they are kind of communicating with the client and trying to remind everybody to get their stuff in. But what you're saying is that the software is not helping. It's not facilitating that.
It works, but it just creates a bottleneck, and it's just not a smooth process as I've seen other softwares. I've used 3 different softwares and I would not rank this one in the top. And I'd say that's clearly, if you can have a more modern system that can route things easier and help those people doing that job, it would make a big difference. It's the easiest one I see on the table for that process.
Jordan, several years back, prior to you being here, I know we had the building department had looked at sort of a type of program for sort of the large builders that maybe have like 6 different floor plans, and those are the same 6 houses they build over and over and over. That, a way to kind of get those through quicker because you don't have to review them every time if it's the same set of blueprints, on those big volume builders. Does the program like that still exist? Does that help move plans or through quicker?
It does.
Does that get implemented?
That's our multi-use program.
Okay.
We do use it. Several of the local builders use it, and it is a successful program that most builders do appreciate. Especially if they're building the same models of houses over and over.
Okay. When you look at sort of where the most amount of your guys' work goes, or if there are holdups, if there are applications that are complete versus not complete when they turn them in, is it safe to say you would probably say the more incomplete ones from maybe the DIYers, the folks that aren't those big volume builders, or is it kind of across the board? Just anybody can on any day have an incomplete application?
I mean, anybody could have an incomplete. People who do frequent building permits typically do have on average a higher complete, and approvable plan set.
Okay.
It's on average because they're familiar with the process. I don't know if I'd say specifically that's where the most time is being taken. It's a volume thing. I would say on average, someone who's unfamiliar with the process, it does take longer to help them through the process, but at the same time, there may be less total volume from more first time, versus the high volume of the regular.
Okay. So I mean, what gets prioritized? I mean, I guess if application, is it just strictly first in, first out, or is it, okay, we've got some, we get an incomplete application that needs a lot of work to it. Do you focus on that? Or if it's like, oh, we've got 5 complete applications by volume builders that we know we can get in quick, do you focus on that one that maybe came in first that has problems, or do you try to get those 5, single family, are complete, ready to go? Do you try to get those off your plate, or do you focus on sort of that more difficult one because it came in first?
It's set up in a purely first come, first serve, but then broken down by different permit types. So some permit types have a faster natural queue.
Okay.
They're set up in essentially for residential, it'd be pretty much 2 queues, but we do put like decks, small decks, a fence, signs for commercial, small stuff like that goes in a faster queue.
Yeah.
A new single family townhouse, it all goes in the same queue and it's first come, first served. We don't take priority to builder versus homeowner. It's purely, if you come in first, you'll be reviewed first.
Okay.
Last question on a related topic. Does the county or does your department issue permits for new wells?
We do not. That's done through the health department and Department of Ecology.
Okay. Ecology was under the impression that we did it. And I said, I don't think that's in our bailiwick. And so they said, well, no, you guys are approving more permits on the West Plains. So I'll circle back with Dr. Velasquez.
Ecology issues exempt well permits.
Exempt, well, yeah.
We know that through hers.
Yeah, we know that for her, yeah.
Years we spent on hers. Health district plays.
They
part
play a
of it.
role, they have
Yeah,
to
they-
inspect or do something.
They inspect it, but it's ecology that allows for it to happen.
It was a strange comment from ecology. Why are you guys doing this? Well, I think we are. Anyway, thanks. Thanks for not doing that.
I mean, I see the workflow. It's not me specifically doing it, but I know that.
Great. Be the one at the health district to talk
Okay.
about Dr. B.
One last question. So basically these three, you're changing out the one building official position to make it an assistant. And then you've got these other two positions and you're able to keep your budget, a flat budget for this next year.
Correct.
All right. Well, thank you for doing that. And these seem like good positions that will. You've been there for a while now. You can kind of see where you could use the help. So
No, I appreciate that.
hopefully you find some good folks to fill those positions.
And they're an enterprise fund, so they're held to the same. They're not in our general fund, so that's part of
But
it.
you're getting enough fees coming in to cover your costs.
Not on the next slide, not the 10 slides.
We have a very healthy fund.
Okay,
And a healthy contingency built into next year to give Jordan the flexibility to work through ongoing staffing challenges and position changes and things. We kind of erred on the side of caution for 2026 for Jordan to keep getting his feet under him. So
I guess I just want to make sure that we're putting into the 2026 budget a new system though.
12 balancing.
Right.
over the system.
No, but I would want to make
Get
sure
it
that
authorized.
we're getting it in there.
Yes.
once system readiness and kind of a system is identified and we have a price tag, we absolutely would bring a budget amendment forward for this fund and could easily do a budget amendment for Jordan.
Yeah, right. I would say we should put it in now, just as a placeholder.
You have an
With
estimate?
an estimate, we could, so that way it's just in the budget to say, we all feel that it's important now. Not waiting for the budget amendment or any of that, I think otherwise it's like, there gets to be the finger pointing, if it's not in the budget, so I can't do it, and it's like, no, let's get it in the budget to get a new system. You know. Whatever time it happens, if it doesn't happen in 2026, it's not. Just any big deal. I mean, it's a big deal because we need to make it happen. So I'd rather have a placeholder.
And then looking at that, we did put a contingency for those types of purchases specifically for that reason, to be able to be flexible on what we need to do to meet the goals we want to meet. So that was taken into account. For contingency, and if on the positions, 2 of them are already budgeted for specifically, so the add is the
And that's
process, the permit manager.
And that's why you'd have to draw down the fund balance for this new position.
But since there's such a fund balance, we don't need to increase permit.
Correct. There is no plan for permit increase fees at all for building side. So just that was for the end of the presentation, but there is no proposed increase in fees. I will say that we are going to be looking at in the future next year, likely at adjustments to the fee schedule, but it's more to balance the buckets we have within there not to say an increase, but just to balance it properly. So it wouldn't be an increase per se, it would just be more. Instead of having a processing fee this high, you take some of the processing fee away and put it to the plan review fee side, not an actual increase.
Jordan, I think you're at the early stages of evaluating software. I don't know how much, if at all, you've conversed with IT, but is it fair to say that the 500,000 is planning for a software replacement during 26? So a big portion of that is likely capital.
Yes, the software would, from my estimates, is around the 100 to 200,000 mark. Okay, but that's with full implementation. I have not gone a full breakdown because they won't give that to you, do more of a commitment.
Yeah.
I did get an estimate, and that's seemed roughly where it'd be at.
And just a rough estimate, is it realistic if there was a selection in the coming months, is it realistic to implement something in 26?
You would realistically want to implement it, either early, you want to time it with the permit volumes. Permit volumes come high in spring and they start tapering right around now. You want to make sure you time it in that slow period so that everyone can adjust and have the least amount of impact. So it could be done in 26. That would be what I'd be shooting for, in a worst case 27, because you have to time in that slow. Otherwise, it'll be a challenging for the community, for our staff, challenging for everybody to take it on in a high volume scenario.
So to Mr. Cuny's point, I would recommend when we do bring the final budget adoption back for the commissioners, that we break out that contingency, show a capital line. Because once you use that capital line, it does show that we are self-balancing revenues to expenses. It's a one-time capital purchases, but our ongoing annual revenues and our annual expenses would be pretty close to a balance.
I will like one last comment on that software is, from what I've seen, the annual cost is lower from the competitors. So it actually would be an overall savings annually. To close out, that our budget is set for $4,076,157. Our proposed total revenue is $3,888,300. If you look in the previous slide, I did take into account, can we go back one slide?
They do all have it in front of them, Jordan.
Okay.
On their computers, so the commissioners are seeing it.
In the previous slide, we do show two different styles of trend line on there. It's a linear and a line that takes into account the highs and lows and actually tries to follow a trend, a different style of trend. This budget did take into account both trends and having that balance for both, either way. So that was taken into account, looking at in the potential of we have less revenue. Where are we at? And we are okay in both cases. And I have taken that into consideration when I did this budget with budgeting.
So if you start to see a trend upward with more customers coming in wanting permits, what would you do to adjust? Like, by the end of next year or something, if you needed to adjust in terms of staffing to be able to handle. Like right now, I see that you're kind of in this, you're like, okay, we can handle this a little bit more, a little bit less. We're right in that sweet spot in terms of the revenue coming in and the staff that you have to do the work. Is that also what the contingency is for? To address any issues with if you end up having more permits and you're not able to process them, or the need for more permits?
The contingency is for a few things. One is giving a buffer to me. Two, it's making so I have a couple of vehicles to replace. The contingency is just to do a couple more housekeeping type items. Yeah.
than it is operating, okay.
I would say in the event we started seeing permits come in at a faster rate and we see our revenues climbing higher than predicted, we would likely do we'd have to look at either doing a temporary fill or a permanent land zone position is what I'd expect that volume to surpass again. Either spot it can surpass is processing, so then it would be a project coordinator position if that was the case, but I believe we're comfortable in that one, so I would find it more likely to be the plan zone position that would add additional.
And in the past, we had trouble filling those positions, right? So you were contracting out some of that work?
We do have 3 different contracts with private firms to do plan review. Currently, we're primarily using those for commercial projects, but we can use them for residential as well. I will say the preference from what I've seen is to have it reviewed in-house over the third party, so we've been trying to keep it that way. But we do have that as a backup as well.
Kind of to do the ebbs and flows, so if you see a spike, rather than going and hiring someone, all of a sudden that goes back down and you're overstaffed, use that to be kind of your fill-in. They handle those peaks and valleys. But certainly if the trends continue to go up, Jordan knows I'm gonna be looking to hire another person if there is a foreseeable longer term trend on that, because we want to stay ahead on firm timelines, delivery.
But you're gonna hire another plan examiner, so that's great, and then hopefully new technology would help folks with proper data to move things along more efficiently as well.
Yeah, and we'd like to make sure people can see what's going on. If you don't have good data, it's hard to show it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
If there's any other questions. Thank you, appreciate it.
It's fine, happy to be failing out on.
Time is it's long right there. It's true. Good morning.
Good morning, how are you doing, Scott?
That's true.
We're doing okay.
It should be for like the day that it's.
Right.
Did I wait a moment?
You've got the commissioners here, so I think go ahead.
Commissioners, we are back before you. We last saw you on September 12th or the 9th. And we subsequently met with our budget and finance folks on September 12th and come through with a conclusion that's before you today. First couple of slides are related to the 2 legislative appropriation grants that come through Commerce. One's for the periodic update, which is the basic comprehensive plan update. And you can see on here where we stand with that. We'll be billing or with it's a $700,000 grant broken into 2 fiscal year components. So 350 the first year, 350 for the second and a half years. And it's a little confusing because there's another fiscal year in there. So the contract with Commerce for actual fiscal 26 is $227,500. And there's then remaining $122,500 that will be allocated after July of 26, which corresponds to the 6-month extension we were given by the legislature. And so what Commerce did was not change the amount, but spread it out so we could use and have access to the full amount over that period of time. So the full 350 is there. Next slide, please. The second legislative appropriation was specifically for climate resilience. Spokane County was awarded $800,000. We offered to partner with many of the smaller communities, including the city of Cheney. And so put together a collective pool of $1.2 million and then reduced that because Commerce itself was doing a lot of the greenhouse gas emissions, which was part of that first scope, which left us a contract of about $900,000. We ultimately billed about 326 of that, leaving about 600,000. And now we're augmenting that for fiscal 26 with an $800,000 budget. But the 800 also, or I should say the 600,000 does carry over. And so we have access to that full 1.4 million up to and potentially through at least the middle part of fiscal 27. And so that gives us a chance to make sure we're getting everything we need to on the climate grant. And one of the innovative things that we did is we asked Commerce if we could include the entire environmental impact statement process under the climate grant funding. Because after all, they tie together very well, and that was authorized. So it gives us a huge bonus to being able to study things in the EIS that we might have had to limit that going forward. So very, pretty solid on those aspects. Next, please.
Can I pause real quick?
Of course.
So the climate planning grant, that's the 800,000. Start date 7/1, and that's the kind of the second piece you talked about augmenting.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And then on the 605, the end date on that was June, but you're saying Commerce is allowing it to be extended.
That's correct.
Okay,
Heather's office doesn't have any documentation on that yet.
okay. So how do you, where's the answer back from Commerce yet?
We've
Verbal.
got confirming emails in our file for this. We'll forward them to Jeff's office. I thought you guys had those by now.
Okay.
So even though the fiscal year for the state ended June 30th of this year, they're gonna let you use that 605. So when will we contract for those dollars?
When and if we need,
They want us to spend the 800 first. Okay.
Yeah. It's a very strange process because we've got two grants doing essentially planning work. One is in the very traditional state budgeting biennium process. It said if you don't use it by fiscal 25, you get cut off and you've got this fund in fiscal 26. And yet the climate grant, for whatever reason, was set up to carry on for the full period up to and including even implementation activities after we're done with the comp plan into fiscal 27. I have no idea why they were set up that way. It's atypical, as Jeff has told us from the beginning. But we've asked over and over and over again, and we've got, written confirmation on it from several times. But
Maybe it's from a different source of funds, the climate.
Well, I imagine that would be the distinction
I
is.
mean, rather than like
legislature.
general funds of
Yeah.
the state.
I don't know. But it's a very generous amount for kind of planning, so we're happy to use it the best we can.
So Heather's reached out to Commerce to try to confirm, is that true? And we haven't heard in the latest request.
Correct. In the
back
grants
to-
office, we don't have anything.
But we're
This
waiting
money,
an
like,
answer
didn't-
from them.
We're waiting to get word from Chesney's office for that documentation, so then we could take it to the state. At this point, from Heather's perspective in the grant office, the one that did in June is closed, so we would need some sort of documentation to be able to bill against it.
But if this grant was funded through CCA funds,
That's
they
what
don't have, rate on a biennial basis.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah,
That it might be the Climate Act
yeah, money.
dollars and they put it aside, but that's interesting. We need to.
We just need to track down all the documentation.
The grant that's Commerce has sent for this year for the climate resiliency is $800,000. That's what it is for. We just got it, so it'll be coming to all of you. Well, Scott's gonna brief on that today. But in that contract, I don't think it even delineates a source of funding for it. So I don't know if we know now.
It does not address the 605 in the 800. So the grant coming before you today will just be the 800.
So the EIS now we know can be applied toward.
We do that from the beginning. We built that in at the
Okay.
very beginning,
Alright.
so that we didn't have to encumber the PUG funds and then do something else.
Oh, and that's, so has that already been applied to that?
Some part of it has,
Okay, all
yes.
right, gotcha.
That's
Thanks.
And Scott did mention the $800,000. That is the contract between Spokane County and Commerce for fiscal 26. It's a continuation of this contract we had for fiscal 25. That's set up for your legislative agenda on the 8th, I believe. And it's accepting those funds for further use. And so we've got the same consulting teams in place. And with the flexibility of these funds, we may be able to use them well, and we're planning to use them for at least some staff expenses that would include, at the very least, overtime or extraordinary expenses. And it could be that for time being applied to the climate grant, we can use those funds to reimburse the general fund.
I mean, that's what I would do, and I would try and spend it down as soon as, if we are gonna get that 605 that we didn't spend, I would really like to get that back and know that we can put that into our budget in 26 and 27. So we'd want to spend the 800,000 down so that ecology would then enter into a new contract. Sorry, Commerce.
That's correct. That's our intention, is to have that as a reserve and then tap into that in fiscal 27. And again, we'll get the documentation we have to Jeff's office. My understanding, and if I misunderstood, I'm sorry, my understanding was Heather was gonna try to independently corroborate this, but we'll probably.
She didn't call. We just haven't seen.
I mean, that's excellent if we can get that 605 back again in 27. That, and you are able to bill a variety of things to those grants, you know, it sounds like they have a range of things that you could bill to, including staff.
We, again, Commerce has been remarkably flexible with the Climate Resiliency Fund. We've together negotiated a scope of work to have deliverables for a number of those line item budgets. And so as long as we deliver that as we said we would, then we get reimbursed by Commerce. It's different than having to submit, for example, solving invoices or receipts for expenses. It's tied to deliverables. And the good point is we get to help write those deliverables and then Commerce signs off on them. So yes, we have a lot of flexibility on how we can use these funds.
But if you were gonna use them for staff expenses, like your staff that are working on the climate chapter right now, you'd have to get that okayed by them up front as an expense.
On the 605, we would go back because that would have to be probably a separate contract for the county and Commerce, even if Commerce is bringing the funds over. And we would simply make a statement in that yes, that will cover some part of staff reimbursement.
Yeah, I just don't wanna leave any money on the table, so
We
we wanna
did not,
bill, we wanna bill for all the work that we're doing.
we were able to capture on the PUG, for example, we did not bill, or the consulting teams did not submit invoices for the full 350,000. However, we delivered each of the deliverable expectations, and so Spokane County was in fact reimbursed $350,000. That's about $50,000 or $55,000 more than we spent on our consulting team. So there was a little bit of a cushion that came in last year on the PUG side as well. Next, right, Ron? These two slides we've worked on specifically with Jeff, Jason, to go through where we were for the actuals, where we are for 25, estimating an end of the year close, and then where does that lead us in the 26 budget? 24 is a fairly good benchmark, and Jeff can probably elaborate on this as we call it. It's the first year of the divorce. And so how you allocated numbers between building and planning in 23 versus building and planning separately in 24. Part of it was going through the entire fund catalog and trying to separate those get the numbers. Is that essentially,
If you see the 226 in 24 at the bottom in the first column. So in 24. Billing for current planning brought in 226,000 more. Than we paid our staff to accomplish it. In 25, we brought in 175,000 less. In 26, based on current projections, we're bringing in 130,000 less. So we're close. If we trend it out, an average is about that. We're never gonna get the exact dollar amount in the given year, but trying to get the current planning fees to cover the current planning cost is the goal here. So you can see we're in the ballpark each year.
as you gave us your consensus, we will implement that adjusted fee schedule in January, and that will take this into account. As Jeff said, we're hoping that we've kind of hit the numbers right. Generally speaking, if we stay right about the same level of business and use the CPI adjustment, we will come close to hitting, or should be able to hit, this revenue number, this projected for 26. If we get a little bit of increased building and land activity, so much the better. But we're tracking to do that. Yeah, kind of a secondary role. Jeff and Scott and I have talked, thinking about 2027. If we are able to balance our fees, in other words, our revenues versus our expenses, one of the discussion items is, should current planning go, in a sense, back into an enterprise fund? Should it be taken off the general fund, that side of the equation entirely, and just put over in the as an enterprise fund? And so that's something we'll explore as 26 unfolds. Would that make sense to do that? It seems like there's probably advantages and disadvantages, but
It's worth watching to see if it makes sense. At the bottom, second from the bottom, you'll see the general fund draw. And each year that is reducing. So in 24, the general fund covered almost 1.4 million, then down to the 817, then down to the just shy of 800 projected next year. Some of that, when building and planning were separated, liability, IT, a lot of our internal had already been determined how it was going to be built. And so some of the billing has shifted as 2-year streams were changed. You can explain it better than me.
Yeah, some of the IT billing and the liability billing is included in the internal services cost center that we've briefed you on before. So where IT charges are for the entire general fund, things like that. We don't have a need for planning to pay them directly out of their own budget. So we've kind of adjusted where those expenses are happening.
That's some of the reason between the big jump from 24 with reduction down in 25. And 24, they had $445,000 worth of billing that they don't have anymore now that building planning is totally separated and the accounting has been corrected.
Planning has also had a reduced draw on internal legal services with the accumulation of other, I think, ongoing litigation that had happened. So there's just been less of a draw for those dollars and services, freeing up time for the civil team.
So where is all of those grants in this? Where is the planning grant and the climate change grant in this?
Separate.
You'll see them on the next slide, how they kind of move in.
But they're not incorporated into the general fund. We've gone away from that practice of having our grants in the general fund.
Right, I'm just trying to get the sense of the total expenses and revenues of the total department.
for this first round in the fiscal 25 and fiscal 26 budget planning for those grants, those were planned to be used for outside expenses for professional services. At the time, we were not planning on using those to reimburse staff because we had the ARP contribution, which was covering staff and compensation for the long range team. Now that that's coming to an end, we are looking at shifting gears to try to recover some of that cost using these grant funds, but it was not programmed in 25 or 26.
Well, we can program it for 26, right? Still? you make that choice.
Yes, yeah, and we're going to,
Cause I mean, there seems like there's a lot of dollars there that we probably won't spend all of that just on outside consultants.
and that's kind of the bottom line on that 26 column chart over there. Our ask is 114,000 because that's the difference between our budget number and taking out the remaining ARP funds. What we would do is we would ask that from you as a commitment of general fund dollars, and then we will work to program that into the grant budgets to recover that over the course of the year.
Let's go to the next slide. I think it might help answer your question. So this one shows their total expenses of 2.36 million. It is 240-ish thousand over the 246, I guess. Over the target amounts, right, in a flat budget. There's 132 remaining in ARP. So assuming that will go against that, that takes it down to 114,000. So then the question would be, do we find a PUD grant, the climate resiliency grant to close the remaining gap, or do a general fund?
Is there any downside to assuming that it would just be programmed on the grant? It seemed like you'd use the grant dollars
Over $1
first,
million
then there's an increase in the reserves for the capital and other things we need to do. So I'm just wondering, is there a reason why we would do a general fund commitment instead of just plugging those grants in?
Mostly it's a timing issue. The grant contracts have been trying to be pushed through as cleanly as possible up front, and now we're doing our budget process. It will involve some degree of an amendment to those contracts, which we don't have a commitment for that. We have the verbal discussion that yes, staff reimbursement is an eligible expense for the grant if it's reaching these deliverables. So we're confident we can get there. The timing doesn't let us put something in front of you today that says, yes, we have a commitment to do it and it's signed by all parties. So if today's commitment was to use, that as a general fund marker, we could come back as soon as we can with these contracts through Jeff's and Heather's office and say, okay, we've covered.
Personally, I think it makes sense to assume the grant will come through, do that work, and if it doesn't, then try to figure out if there's a gap that the general fund can cover. There's just so much demand on the general fund right now, or way more demand than we have dollars for.
Understood.
That's my personal preference.
I mean, I feel like. I mean, it depends on what deliverables, but have you already signed the contract for the second planning grant? Not the pub.
Commerce has, but that's what's coming before you in the 28th.
I mean, if there's broad enough goals there that you feel like you can bill your time, your admin time, your planner time to reaching whatever the deliverables are. I mean, I'd rather not even use the remaining ARP. I would. I mean, it seems very reasonable to be able to bill $246,000 of over $1 million grant to the staff that are doing the work, and then the remaining would still be like $750,000 for consultants. Anyway, I'm challenging if I just feel like we should be able to do that. And then we can put those general fund dollars into other county needs. I mean, since there's a lot of other county needs that don't have huge grants coming in right now. That's my suggestion.
And we're calling it ARP because
it's not
it was
really, yeah.
originally.
But it's just general fund
But
now.
correct, that is ARP that was backfilled with general fund, so it is an option. We don't have the 26 deadline on that, 132.
246,000 would be what, a couple planners and some of your time and some of admin, you know, assistance time.
Should be about right.
It's pretty reasonable. 'Cause I know you have one planner that's been putting a lot of time into the climate work, so you could probably bill almost all of his time to the climate grant.
Yeah, that would be the approach we would take. Spread it around for the staff that are touching deliverables that are going against that grant. That's the audit requirement we'd have to be careful to satisfy.
They'd probably have to do some time keeping. In case you're ever
Generally, yes.
audited on it,
Yeah.
yeah. Anyway, that would be my suggestion. Seems like before the end of the year, you think you could make sure that those things
End
would
of
be
this year,
like,
almost certain.
well, no, I mean, just calculate it out with your staff.
Sure.
Yeah, make the projection out for next year. So that would be my suggestion, especially if we have another 605,000 sitting out there.
If we get the 605, I think that'd be very easy to do. We just need that documentation.
That's why you're holding that money, because you didn't have the documentation.
But even without that, for next year,
I think it could be possible without it. I think it's definitely possible with it.
I'd be confident that we could do that.
it's not.
Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you.
You get one comment.
Scott, earlier when we were talking with, building, I mentioned the TIB meeting and the dashboard that they use for tracking projects and stuff. And could you just comment a little bit about that? Because I was comparing that to what we ought to be doing here at the county.
Well, yeah, the Transportation Improvement Board tracks hundreds of projects over dozens of years, almost 5-6 year periods. And it's, again, it's based on a reimbursement track, all 39 counties. They have a dashboard set up where you can look at them by success rate, you can look at them by geography, you can look at progress. Who's got their project on time, who's in a delayed situation. It's incredible. They set that up as really something. So along that line, Scott already asked us to consider making ourselves ready for a dashboard, and that's what we're, in a very crude way, we're trying to clean up SmartGov so that any dashboard software could extract those data and do this kind of thing. But Tim has a terrific example. It's really impressive.
And it's color coded and stuff, so you don't have to read, you just bang there, red, there you go to it, and then you're done. Anyway, thank you.
Sure.
That's not great.
Thanks, commissioners.
Thank you.
Just needed that validation.
Color coding, that's the key.
It's the key.
For simple minds.
Speaking of simple minds.
I'm here. Well, thank you for giving us the opportunity to talk about the Housing and Community Development Department budget. I'll start by saying we acknowledge that our budget is a little more complex than a standard general fund budget, as we've got multiple revenue streams that come in. We make program income, we have grants that we plan for and grants that just come out of the blue, like disaster recovery. So we're going to go through this. I anticipate questions. We're happy to address those questions to the best of our ability here in this meeting, but also invite each of you to meet with us one-on-one, go through the budgets and have more in-depth conversations about our funding sources, our strategies, and also those priorities that you have identified. So to start out with, just a general overview of the department. I think most of you know this, but for the public, we also want to point out that our department, we administer both federal, state, and local pass-through funds. out into the community, specifically as it relates to homeless services, affordable housing, and then community development. Community development can be difficult to define at times. Essentially in our capacity, that's really helping out with some of our smaller communities with some of their infrastructure needs, some of the infrastructure needs of social service agencies, et cetera. So Ron, if you wanna go. So our department, we're 6 full-time employees here. Our salaries and benefits, approximately $587,000, what we plan for. There are also indirect costs associated with that. So our total admin costs, if you take our salaries and benefits plus indirects, that gets closer to the $1 million mark. We are down 1 regular full-time employee for 2025 as well as going into 2026. I think many of you got to know Pavel Parfilo while he was working with us. After Pavel left, we had not backfilled that position. We feel like we've got enough capacity with our existing team to be able to carry that work forward. So Brittany Reed, who was here last week, assumed Pavel's portfolio for the affordable housing piece. I also put up here a copy of our org chart and kind of the tentacles that we have within our organization. So you can see the I don't know what color that is, kind of reddish color. That is our team. And then to the left of that, with our dashed lines, those are the different subcommittees and boards that we sit on as part of our general regional collaboration. So we have our Housing and Community Development Advisory Committee that advises you all as Board of County Commissioners for different funding recommendations. We have a seat on the Continuum of Care Board, which is specific to homelessness. Then we have a seat on the City of Spokane's Community Housing and Human Services Board, as well as the City of Spokane Valley's Homeless Housing Task Force, they call that. And then also we have the Spokane Regional Long-Term Recovery Group Board that we sit on as a guest, if you will, as coordinating the efforts around the disaster recovery. So one thing I wanted to do in this is isolate the disaster recovery grant. So we're approaching the 1-year mark when we first received notice of this grant. So this is response to Oregon and Gray Road fires in 2023. The total grant award on that was $44 million. We have set aside $4.4 million for admin and planning. And then we have the remainder of it, $39.7 million reserved for contractual services. This is just our preliminary plan at this time. There's a high probability that those numbers adjust over time as we better understand what the needs are. I think it's important to know on this grant, we have 6 years to expend these funds. So there is going to be a considerable amount of longer term costs associated with that. Thus the planning and admin there. That is maxed out at the 5%. So what you're seeing is we can take a maximum 5% for admin and then a maximum 5% for planning efforts. That total comes up to 10% for our regular community development block grant program. Our maximum amount is 20%. So we're half of that, and we hope that we'll be able to get across the finish line without needing to subsidize those funds with other grant funds that we have. Our first contract is expected to be executed early in 2026. That is for our service navigator for folks that are going through the system, helping navigate them to the services that they need. And then additional contracts we anticipate awarding in the second quarter of 2026. Our first request for proposal will end, it's open right now, it'll end mid-November. So that will identify the service navigator position, but also we've got a request for interest in that as well, because we're trying to figure out who would be interested in providing some of the services that we haven't done before, like tree removal, asbestos remediation, et cetera. So we're having really good community feedback on that and getting a lot of interest around that request for proposal as well as request for interest. So anyways, I just wanted to isolate that as a part of our presentation. Similar to how we've isolated some of the COVID recovery funds in the past, just so that it doesn't throw our numbers too far off. So next up, Ron. Good question. Yeah.
Can you remind me, it's the 6 years from receipt of the funds or from approval plan?
Yeah, so from the, and I'm gonna blank on exactly the AAN, the annual award notification, I think is what it's called. From that day, which I believe was January 19th, that's the start of the 6-year clock of 25. Yes, right. So we have several budgets, or I guess funds that fall within the Housing and Community Development Department. So I'm gonna go through these. You'll see different like names and titles for this historically. So I think in the past, the department has referred to Fund 123 as a housing trust fund. But I wanted to really isolate out the different tentacles associated with this fund because we have multiple revenue sources that come in. The first one is the county admin fund. So recently the state, I think it was in July of 23, made a change to the RCW that allowed for it changed the formula of how the document recording fees were appropriated. And with that, there was an exception to be able to take an additional administrative 10% off of the document recording fees. So what you're seeing up there on that very first line, the county admin fund, those were funds that we received as it related directly to the admin. The unique thing about the document recording fees is that we are the only county in the state where we don't just exclusively administer document recording fees. So what that means is the city of Spokane also gets a share of document recording fees. So we use our real estate excise tax formula to disperse those funds between the city and the county. That law was changed just, I think, was that in August, Tessa?
Yeah, I believe so.
In August, that changed. So that number is static. It's not going to increase. All it will do will be spent down. And that's money that we can use for admin specific funds, but also we could reprogram it to contractual services. The next line is the sales and use tax. So this is the one that you'll hear folks refer to as the 1406. This is effectively a state rebate on sales tax that comes back to the county. You hear weekly from guests at your legislative session about the 1590. That's kind of a partner to this revenue source. This is a pretty static fund source that comes in just based off of that sales and use tax. So that is part of this Fund 123 as well. That is specific to affordable housing development with a caveat to provide additional funding to provide support services for folks who are residing in those affordable housing units. The next one is document recording fees. So document recording fees come in and then there's a formula split that goes into that. The majority of that split goes towards homeless services. The other part of it goes towards affordable housing. And so those 4 line items, if you will, make up the total Fund 123. I want to note that what we have as the title of these slides as I go through is budget capacity. That is intentional because what we do is we may not have that full amount between those 4 fund sources committed at this time. But what we do is when we put our budget in for you all as the commissioners to approve, we put in our full budget capacity so that the budget office doesn't have to come to you all regularly as we do a request for proposal to ask for, what is it called, Tessa?
Budget amendment.
Yeah. So what we try to do is capture, this is how much we have of prior resources with expected resources. And then let's have that full budget capacity so that when we do a request for proposal, we have the capacity to be able to enter into those contracts without additional administrative burden on. Tessa, do you have anything to add on kind of that?
Nope, that was a very good summary of, the approach that we take.
So just to clarify, you're basically saying that every budget process, the board approves an expenditure of an up to of what that capacity is, but it may not all be spent correct in that year, and then maybe there's a future decision on the balance of that. Yep. Okay.
And part of it too, I'll say is, for Workday, the new software tool for finances, we encumber all of the subrecipient contracts now, which is a huge benefit to the county to have for these program managers. They have direct insight into what they've already RFP'd and have contracted out. So we need a certain amount of budget authority to manage those contracts, through Workday as well. So, it's kind of a twofold approach there for the team.
So do we have, I see you've got each fund laid out with like kind of the max budget capacity. Do you have data on what we've spent to each of these accounts then?
Yes, yeah.
That's later on in the PowerPoint.
I don't know that we're gonna get into that. We wanted to keep a high level budget capacity for the funds right now, but we certainly can meet with you one-on-one and get into more of that aggregate detail on those. But yes, we do. To Tessa's point, with Workday now, we have a much better ability to be able to get those numbers without having to do additional mining of the system. Would that be appropriate to say?
Okay, yeah, I was just doing some quick math later on in the PowerPoint, to see what we have left. Yeah, but I'll let you continue.
Just a comment, so while what George is proposing in the budget would authorize a spending of up to those, the other touch point with the commissioners will be when he prepares the RFP rounds for each of these, you would be weighing in on to the priorities and then how much the RFPs that you would be going out for. So it's not carte blanche authority, there's a multiple, it's just, this is a budgetary authority, and then there would be more functional how the RFPs are rolled out and how much you want to go towards certain eligible expenses, or eligible utilization of it.
Yeah, great clarity, Scott. Thanks for that. So this is our cash on hand, if you will, fund. This is not a reimbursement. This is revenue that comes in directly to our department off of these different revenue sources. The remainder of which will be grant specific. So either through the federal government or the state. This is our local summary of funds. Ron, if you want to come into that. So Fund 131, this is one that many of you are familiar with. This is the Community Development Block Grant Program, the Home Partnership Program, as well as a legacy award that we received that was called the Home ARP. That was early on COVID funding for the development of affordable housing. So you can see what our budget capacity is here, and I will say that 5.2 million, is it approximately, is Home ARP. Yeah, so so the majority of the funding that you're seeing here is for Home ARP, which we have a specific project identified and committed funds for. But just a basic breakdown on that. The reason you'll see another fund that we'll get to in a few slides, it'll be Fund 151. We have two federal funds. 131 is specific to housing and community development because we have program income that comes in here, so we don't want to muddle with the general fund, federal fund account. So anyways, Ron, if you want to go on to the next one. This is Fund 151, so any of the federal funds that the county receives would be seated in Fund 151. We have the Disaster Recovery Grant as well as the Emergency Solutions Grant seated in there, and that is new for this year. In the past, we've just put anything federal there, and we're trying to be a little more strategic about how we assign these different revenue sources. The reason we decided to put this in Fund 151 is that we don't anticipate program income coming in on either the disaster recovery or the emergency solutions grant program. So that's why we put that there.
So these are showing anticipated revenues for next year, correct?
Correct,
Budget
yes.
capacity. Okay, so it's not a snapshot of like the fund balance within each fund. It's what you're anticipating new coming in next year.
It's a conglomerate of all of the above, I think, what we're forecasting, what we have, and what remaining prior fund sources.
Correct. And the only
Okay.
funds that George would have a fund balance in would be 123 and 131. 151 is it's the federal grant fund, and then Fund 152, which I believe we'll see next, is the state grant fund, and those are all of our cost reimbursable awards. So we're expending the money first, waiting for the state or federal government to pay us back.
One thing to note is because we have not, because you see the disaster recovery in there and you see the total at $5.6 million, but we got a $44 million.
That would fly with that
Yeah.
question.
So clarity on that, we've only budgeted an anticipated spend of up to $5 million of disaster recovery, just as we're getting off the ground, not knowing really what to anticipate, and how quickly that'll get going. So there is a potential that you see sometime in calendar year 2026, the budget office coming to you for a budget amendment on this fund, if we spend greater than the budget capacity of $5 million.
Well, like ARP, we're not gonna get a $44 million check, like United one, it's all cost recovery.
That makes sense. Despite the big check. that they-
Despite-
For promotional purposes only.
That was an IOU. Okay.
So wait, sorry, just to clarify that. So the 5 million that you have here. That is for anticipated spending 26,
Correct.
including
Yeah, for 44.
including admin.
Yes.
Okay.
Kind of a 1/6 portion, or kind of a annual
If you think
slow
about
spend down
6
over the
years,
prorated share. Correct. Yep.
Got it.
So
And it will
what-
go up and down depending on what that spend turns out to be.
Yep,
Yeah.
correct. So hopefully in 2027, we're spending at a much higher clip, and you'll see this
Right.
fund balance increase significantly as we encumber greater budget capacity for disaster recovery. Next slide, Rob. The next one is the Consolidated Homeless Grant, or CHG. This is the largest, aside of the outlier of the disaster recovery, our largest grant we received in the housing and community development. So this is specifically for homeless services, homeless prevention, homeless response, et cetera. And these funds, I believe, Megan, are 100% encumbered at this time. Yeah. So, and yep, good call out. This is a 2-year grant. So we entered into contracts for the 2-year period to align with the state biennial.
Good question. What is M and O on these grants?
Yeah, a lot of stuff. Yeah, a lot of stuff. I don't know what to say other than that. Yeah. Megan, did you want to take that?
I would say that is a lot of like our internal county bills, like indirects, our insurance, all of that really goes to all the internal bills that we have here in the county that we pay back as a general.
And then that's to admin is the staffing to administer.
Yeah, salaries and benefits fall into that. And
General HR, general use of legal services, general use of IT, all the stuff that goes into internal services.
yes, we are proud to support our friends here at Spokane County with the work that they do to support us. Ron, if you want to go on to the next slide. So here is just a breakdown of that whole of those slides that we just went over. So you can see these are some monster numbers, and you can imagine what it would look like if we had the entirety of the disaster recovery in there as well. This is overall budget capacity. We will not spend that much money in this in calendar year 26. I'll go on and talk about some other slides, some different strategic reserve methodology that we have. But this is just kind of a general breakdown of these different fund codes within our department. Next slide. So as far as fund obligations go currently, we have approximately $2.3 million available for admin. You've seen that we will not expend that much money on admin. What we like to do is ensure that we can pay our staff first. And then once we've met all of our obligations for our salaries and benefits, as well as our indirect costs, then any unexpended funds get reprogrammed out into contractual services. So the difference, and I didn't include indirects in there, but with the indirects, we're close to $1 million. But even if we were at $1 million in total admin and indirects, we'd still have $1.3 million available to reprogram. I think it's really important to point out, a lot of grants, you have a 12-month period to spend, and if you don't spend it within that 12-month period, the money goes back. That is not the case for any of our grants, except for the Consolidated Homeless Grant, which has the state biennium. So once we get into that last year of the biennium, that's where we really start taking a really close look at what we call our burn rate on the funding to make sure that we're not leaving too much money to the table. It's really difficult in some grants to be able to land on zero, and we do the best that we can to do that. Oftentimes, there's just not, we don't have the expenditures that we had forecasted. And sometimes our partners don't have the expenditures that they had forecasted. So in a future slide, maybe the next one I'll get to, I'll point out an example of that. As far as contractual services by portfolio, we have our homeless services team has 26 contracts that will run from 7/1/25 to 6/30/26, totaling just over $14.2 million. Our affordable housing, so we have 2 staff doing homeless services. We have 1 staff doing affordable housing, managing 9 contracts at $10.9 million during this time period. And then for community development, we have 1 staff person managing 13 contracts at a total value of just over $1.6 million. So you can see we've got a lot of responsibilities on a really proficient staff, and they do great work carrying a lot of water those responsibilities. Ron, if you want to go on. So, yeah.
Question. So when we talked about like the loan forgiveness from an affordable housing project, when that happens, the fund that's impacted just depends on the funding source was for the loan.
Correct.
Okay.
Generally, that's going to be the home program, that's the federal program, because that's what the legacy was of funding a lot of these programs or a lot of these projects that we bring to you. But in some cases, it may be, so the old department used to call everything the housing trust funds. That included document recording fees. It included the home program and sales and use tax. So it had a bunch of different layers to it. That's why we try and break it out, so it's a little easier to understand what fund sources are committed to what. Okay, next slide. So I mentioned a strategic reserve. So the methodology that we have here is really just to ensure that if there's an urgent community need that presents itself, we have the flexibility to be able to make some adjustments. Throughout my career, I've met with housing developers that have a property that they're ready to acquire and rehab. And I've been in a position where I said, that is excellent. That meets all the community needs. And in 2 years, if you're successful with a request for proposal, we might be able to fund you. So I can't quantify how many projects we've lost over those years. I'm speaking to my experience when I was at the city of Spokane. But needless to say, those conversations never proved fruitful because the market does not wait 2 years for a hope that you might be funded. And so I believe it's really important to have a strategic reserve to be able to address a need as it presents itself.
Another example would be, you helped us with YWCA. You recall, in the ARP general fund, and we weren't meeting certain things, they're able to step in and then help out with that one to keep them as close to whole as possible.
Is that something that you started when you took over the role, or is it been a historical?
Great question. I think it's been a historical practice that hasn't been necessarily communicated very well. Yeah.
By default, like it was there.
We also don't know our revenue sources, our state and our federal. Of course, right now we're in very unique times at the federal level. I saw an article this morning that said that the state's looking at a potential $2 billion budget gap, so they may have to do some significant adjustments mid-biennium. And so the idea is that we're positioned in a way that there's no structural gaps or collapse of our continuum of care as a broader system throughout that. So and I just mentioned continuum of care. So continuum of care, all of our service providers, continuum of care, the HUD federal program is in jeopardy right now. And that could create an $8 million gap if that was pulled from our community. And so what we try and do is make sure that we're in a position where we can catch everything that falls, but at least we can be in a position where we can catch the most critical things. So it also offers insurance. So we met with you commissioners a month or so ago to talk about a repayment of funds to the state. We were able to repay that without having to dip into general fund because we had those strategic reserves to act almost as an insurance policy for our grant funds. So there's a bunch of different reasons why we do what we do. Ultimately, it's to make sure that we're positioned in a way that puts you all as commissioners in a position to respond to the most urgent community needs as they present themselves. Ron, if you want to slides. So as far as some of the ways that we've operated, and this is something I'd be happy to have a conversation with you all to identify what these floors and ceilings look like. We try and maintain for homeless services a floor of $750,000. I think the example that Jeff gave, that was a $750,000 support that we were able to give to the YWCA. And so our floor would have empowered us in that situation to be able to meet that community need. And then the ceiling, we want to make sure that we don't have an excessive amount of funds that are in an account that could be put into action to help out the community. Same with affordable housing. I think the affordable housing is probably a little different because those asks that come into us are significant. When I think about some of the the low-income housing tax credits, if some of those don't go through, then we could have a catchment that we need to be able to support a real important priority project for our community. And so that gives us some of that capacity. Next slide, Ron. I already kind of mentioned this, unobligated funds. We cycle those back in. We reprogram them out to contractual services to make sure that those funds are working in the community if they're no longer needed here in Spokane County. The example that I gave about consolidated homeless grant funds. So the last biennium, so from 7/1 of 23 to 6/30 of 25, Spokane County was awarded a total of $10.9 million, was awarded a total of $11.1 million. We spent 10.9. There was $191,000 that we left unspent, or 1.72% of the total grant award. We would have loved to got that closer to zero, but we were able to do a lot of work to be able to get to that point. And as our staff continues to get more experience, and as we have Workday come online where we have some better financial controls or better financial systems, then we feel really confident that we'll get closer to that zero number in the current biennium that we're in. Ron, next slide.
Question. Oh,
Perfect.
all right, go ahead, finish up.
That's it.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Good question. So the strategic reserve, is that only applying to the two funds, the home fund 123, local homeless and local housing?
Right now, because that is cash on hand, we have, those are cash accounts versus the grant reimbursement accounts. So we try and have some strategy around the federal funds as well, but that's a little more difficult.
So unspent contractual services are reallocated for future RFP. So would that refer to unspent federal?
Yes, yeah, any unspent, so like with the.
That would be a different pot than strategic reserve. We just talked about.
Yes, yeah, correct. And a good example of that is CDBG, Community Development Block Grant Program, always has some funds that are unexpended year over year. Someone either doesn't spend their grant in full, or there's a project that just doesn't come to fruition. We have up to 6 years with CDBG to spend those funds. So we continue to roll those forward. We try and adopt good accounting principles where we're first in, first out on that. And we've really done a lot over the last couple of years to really shore up some of those prior year unexpended funds.
So what are you, I know there's a lot of moving parts with unknowns with the state. We don't receive the continuum of care dollars, the city does. But if they don't get that 8 million, that's a huge gap in our community for homeless services. So what are you anticipating then, just in general, what would you like to be able to send out to proposals in 2026?
I don't know at this point. We're normally we would be doing a broad request for proposal. I think I told you several times, Commissioner Jordan, count on me to the fourth quarter of every calendar year have an RFP. We do, but disaster recovery we want to make sure that that is a priority right now to get those folks that lost everything in those fires. We want to make sure we get those funds deployed as quickly as possible. So we're taking care of that, and then we're going to come in, we're going to do a request for proposal early in 2026 to take care of those unobligated funds. So I'll work with Megan in the budget office to make sure that we've got the.
What approximately amount do we have that we know we have in unobligated funds? Not excluding the HS or the fire mitigation.
I think I'd probably have to email y'all that total because I don't have it.
Okay.
I can say something right now, but I don't want.
But we do have some.
We do,
funds
yes,
that we
absolutely,
plan
yes.
to put out to the community. And then there's some question marks about maybe new funds later in 26 that we receive from the state.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's been standard practice that we get our biennium award for the Consolidated Homeless Grant, and then mid-cycle we get more than. I doubt that's gonna happen this year. I think also part of the reserves that we have is the state told us early on to plan for a 20% reduction to our Consolidated Homeless Grant. We got actually a 20% increase on our Consolidated Homeless Grant, so that freed up a fair amount of money as well in our local cash reserves. Because we wanted to make sure that all that state money was obligated first before we use some of our cash funds. So, but yeah, as we get closer to that request for proposal, I'll kind of brief you all on what that looks like, how much money we're going to put into each portfolio sources.
Thank you.
I will say we're bringing more and more information. I took a look at our last budget presentation and I was a little embarrassed at how simple that was. And hopefully this paints a better picture of the funding that's coming through our department. And like I said at the beginning, we're more than happy to sit down with you and your team to have a more in-depth conversation about what that looks like by fund source.
Thank you. Yeah, appreciate it. Are there any miscellaneous items?
We have an executive session out of miscellaneous.
I think so. I think.
We're done with our budget for the morning. We'll pick back up at 1:30.
Yeah. So
Mhm. And Bryce. Yeah. And
Our pending and potential litigation is under RCW 4230-110. We anticipate no final action and 30 minutes for discussion. I would like President of the Board, Scott Simmons, Matt Folsom, Ashley Cloud, Jeff McMorris, Mike Sparber, Chief Hooper, and Ken Moore, and Bryce Miller. And Nathan McCorkle.
Okay, so we will be going into executive session for 30 minutes for the items discussed. At the end of that 30 minutes, there is no action that will be occurring, so we will then be leaving executive session, continuing our meeting until 1:30 this afternoon. We'll see everyone back for our continued meeting at 1:30.